Welcome to Champagne Sunday. I'm Lauren.
Hey, I'm Bonnie.
I'm Beth.
And we're going to talk about life
After divorce.
And living
The best life.
and the life you love.
Yes, living the life you love on that other side.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome. What are your strategies for dealing with your ex having a new significant person in their life?
Okay.
Perfect.
Wait a minute.
Yes.
All right, so I think we all have significant others or have had somebody else in their life, and that we all have kids that have had to go and spend time with our ex and this new significant other. And of course, mine was short-lived because my ex-husband passed away not long after he had a girlfriend, so I didn't have to deal with, or that wasn't a huge part of our life, but it did affect us. I don't know about y'all, but for me, things were a whole lot better, and he was a whole lot nicer when he had a significant other.
Mine was much nicer when he had a significant other, and I don't know if he was trying to impress her, or I don't want to say prove to me that he was a nice guy after the fact, but some combination of that, because I did and I do like it when he has a girlfriend, because it takes the bullseye off my back, and he has a different interest, and so he's doing other things and he's not thinking about.
Yeah, mine was nicer, and he didn't try and pick as many fights, and we didn't communicate about just nothing. It was truly having to do with the kids and kids only, which when he was with someone else, there was more distance between us, which was healthier for me.
Yeah, I felt that way too, except for early on. Of course, he had a girlfriend as soon as he moved out, and my daughter was very, very young, and we had discussed some parameters, which as soon as she rolled out of my house, the parameters were gone.
Mm-hmm.
But and that was really hard.
To feel like your daughter was in maybe an unhealthy situation when she was at his house.
Well, when she came back and asked me, does sex hurt? My mouth, after I gathered my mouth off the floor and said, "What are you talking about? Can you explain that to me?" Then, I had a lot of things like that, like no real boundaries when the other person was there. Like the doors were all open and she walked in on them a couple times, and things like that. And even now that she's much older, an older teenager, recently she was in a theater production, and he did not tell her that he was bringing somebody and kind of blindsided her. But I tried to prepare a couple hours before, but she was really upset about that. And I said, listen, the way I explained it to her is, when a person's very excited that they have a new person in their life, I said, I don't know, you never watched Oprah, but like Tom Cruise went on Oprah and jumped on the couch in excitement, a grown man, because he had this new love interest in his life, and that's how people feel. But they don't always take into account that their children don't feel that way at all. And so I try to explain it to her, when you have a new love interest, you are excited. Mm-hmm. And it's like you have super hyper focus on that person, and all the other people, you just assume they're going to love that person the way that you love that person. And sometimes they don't take into account the children's feelings, or what happens if what happens if they break up with that person and your child is attached. Mm-hmm. That can be very traumatic. So I don't know, it's a crazy subject, and I think everybody, when you're moving on, they're moving on, you're going to have to address it at some point.
So
if you have kids.
I'm a year at this point out of my divorce, and my ex and I are both in relationships. He is my son is very much involved with the person that my ex-husband is seeing, and the good news is he really likes her. He likes her a lot. He likes her child a lot. So, and she treats him well. Like, all of that is really good.
And that's really important.
And that's what matters to
That
me.
makes it
That's
a lot easier.
very important.
In terms of like communication with my ex, my like complete opposite. I'm in a relationship and have been for a minute, and we are very separate. Like, we don't include my son in anything that we do together thus far, and that's right now that's purposeful. So I don't know. I think everybody looks at it differently, but that's one of the hardest parts, I think, to me about deciding to get divorced was the thought of my child having a step parent. But then I eventually got to a spot where I was like, well, I have really good step parents.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I was in an emergency, I could call my stepdad right now and he would help me. Like, so that has been like a helpful just idea for me. And again, really, likes the person that his father is seeing. So that's a good thing. And I've met her and have, had a positive experience with her thus far. So I don't know, that's kind of where we are right now.
I think the communication part comes into it, and I think I held back a little bit at first because I didn't know the first relationship was gonna, take. You date people and they may or may not stick around. So I waited until this woman was pretty, entrenched, and then I did get her phone number. My ex did not want to provide me that, but my child had a question and needed some things, and so I called this person. I texted her first and said who I was and would it be okay to call. I had a question. My child had to have something at school or whatever, and she was a lovely person, and we cooperated and we communicated very well together. So I think, if you can step back and you don't have huge emotions or feelings or whatever you want to say attached to, I don't want my child to see another person or whatever, that's kind of unrealistic. You're going to have to deal with it. You have to put aside your feelings or whatever and do what's best for your child. And luckily, this woman was gracious, and she really treated my child very well. Took a lot of time with her, spent time with her, talked to her. My child really liked her. And then it was not a permanent thing. So after spending, it was like a year or two, then it was a heartache after that.
So I have I think a good related topic. So yes, when your ex has a significant other, we have to deal with it in a certain way. But at what point, when you're in a relationship, or at what point do you include your child, like introduce your child to that person as your significant other?
Well, I think in the one really significant relationship I had since divorce, I kind of regret introducing my kids because it did not work out, and he was really, I don't know, kind of awful to me, and my kids ended up knowing that. And then if I had wanted to continue any kind of relationship with him after he was awful, they were absolutely not going to have any part of that. And
but your kids were older too.
And my kids are much older, and so it's a different perspective. Just kind of until I think as having adult kids, until I know, and I thought I was in a relationship that was gonna. I thought I was in a relationship where we both mutually cared about each other in the same way, and it turns out we did not. I was the more I cared in a different way than this person did, and so it was different. But I think in the future, it would have to be someone that I felt like truly was going to be a part of my life, long term, to really start involving them in family things.
Well, I did get burned on that. I dated someone for almost a year, and around the 5, 6, about half a year mark, there were introductions, and my child was younger at that time, and she really liked this guy, and this guy is really good with kids, and invited us down for a weekend, and we had a great time. Everything was about my child, and she really liked this person. When he broke up with me, she took it very personally. In fact, like 2 years later, he came to my house to see me, and she was raised well, but she had the bare minimum courtesy to him. And he noticed, and he said, "What's wrong with her?" And I said, "Are you kidding? She had expectations of you too.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't just me."
Yeah.
And I think you have to be real careful with kids. I know people that introduce their kids immediately right out of the thing, and maybe that's good. I just don't think that was good for my kid.
I have been seeing my child knows him, like knows who he is, like has met him in a group setting, or but he does not know him as my boyfriend. Like we don't do things together, the three of us, or family things. And at first it felt a little odd to have my ex-husband clearly doing family things with his significant other, and I'm not. But I have spoken at length with my therapist about it. She's like, "You're being smart, Lauren, because not involving your child while you're trying to figure things out lets you have the separation, like the opportunity to figure things out on your own with this person without any other outside obstacles, and then to decide what you want to do with that. Whereas once you go to that spot where you're all in, and there's not a lot of going back from that. So that has been really helpful to have that conversation with her, because I have thought to myself, well, I probably won't involve anyone in my son's life ever unless they're ready to put a ring on my finger, or we have decided we're going to have a long-term partnership.
Right.
Well, I think that's smart though, because if things, I always like to think of my home as a safe space for my kids. So my ex-husband and his girlfriend did break up, and I've had other friends who are divorced who talk about, keeping not introducing their kid to who they're dating or whatever, because they just wanted their house to be them and their kids.
Yeah.
And also, you get into a relationship, and at 4 and 5 and 6 months, you're still in the honeymoon phase of any kind of relationship, and you don't know. You're excited and you think it's going to last forever, but you don't know exactly how it's going to be. And so to hold that back and just have it be and figure out your relationship
just
on
to
your
figure
own,
out what that is. It's huge. It's
right. And
it's
then
important.
figure out, and if you're going to have to figure out your core relationship, and then add things in after that core relationship is established, I think it's smart.
I think once you're married with kids and then you're divorced with kids, you're so used to having the family unit that it feels like you need to jump into a family unit, when really that's probably the worst thing you could do for everyone.
Because you're establishing a different kind of relationship at that point. It's not the couple, your core relationship is supposed to be that whatever would be a marriage if you were, and you got to see if that's really there, because how do you know if that foundation is strong?
Yeah.
If it's always been muddied with family. Not that it's really muddy, but you know what I mean? But it's different. It's just different, I think.
Well, it just adds dynamics that aren't about you and that other person. Like anything that doesn't involve you and who you're seeing is an extra thing that affects whatever's going on there, Right. That you can choose to deal with early or later, but it is going to affect whatever it is. And I think, I don't know. Right now, again, I'm in that moment where it's just us. It feels like it's just us. And it's really nice to be in that situation.
Well, and I can, okay, so when you bring your child into your relationship, it also kind of changes your relationship.
Yeah.
And
the dynamic changes.
Yeah, the dynamic changes. And it can be, you might love that part of it, or it might not work out as well. But you got to get to a point before you decide that's really what because you're right, you can't undo that.
Right.
So that's just, I think it's hard after divorce because in marriage, at least in some point in our marriage, I don't think any of our marriages ended where we felt really close to our husbands because
Right,
otherwise we
sure.
would have been married. But when you are in a marriage, you have this closeness with another person. Like you're used to having that person. I think that when you get into a significant relationship out on the other side of marriage, it's almost like you crave that same kind of closeness. Does that make sense? That's not necessarily natural because you haven't been married to the new person
Right.
for 20 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's something
true.
that you have to grow. But I think even some of the men that I've dated have been way more forward than I necessarily would have thought because they were already to that point, of course,
Right.
after a 20-year marriage, and then you start a relationship and you want to let's just go ahead and get there so that we can move forward, and it's just not,
No.
Yeah.
it's not,
No.
but so I think
It's not the normal
it's hard.
progression.
It's hard to
because
back
you have
yourself up.
You have to stop and remind yourself of how you were in your early 20s.
Yeah.
Before you knew what it was like to be in a long-term relationship.
Right, and you have
And
to
that,
back
like,
yourself
okay,
up.
hold
Yeah.
on, like,
But you need time to learn the other person
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Right, and it's hard to back up and remember. We didn't get there
Oh,
when we were dating. We got there after 10
yes,
years of marriage.
relearning how to not be in a long-term relationship is
Yes.
huge.
That's huge.
And
Yep.
I think a lot of people get married really quickly because they crave that marriage feeling and may not necessarily be ready for it or may not be what they thought it was going to be. Party foul!
Party foul! Okay.
Whoops.
I'm going to go get us something to clean up some champagne.
I don't know why I
shared
did that.
with
It
my
was even
floor.
chilled. I mean, okay.
It must have bounced over
It
here.
was very rapid.
Yeah. Okay.
Whoops.
Bonnie, is this rug sacred?
Yeah, this is the washable one she
Okay.
takes too.
Oh, good.
Shows. It's fine. You might be a little sticky though.
If I move, I'll drip. I fear.
Yeah.
I should be a ruggable wrap.
You should be.
Do you have ruggables all over?
They
Yes,
should have,
because I can
Right.
throw them in the washer.
They
With
should
the,
be our
with the animals.
advertising.
Yes.
With the animals?
Ruggable.
Ruggables for all your champagne popping spills.
Yes. And pets and art shows.
There you go. Pets and art shows. Ruggables, pets and art shows.
Exactly.
There you go. Well, I have to admit, with my second big relationship, my child did meet him a little earlier, but not because it was planned.
Oh, there you go.
But it did happen, and I think because of the first one, she automatically did not take to him. She was much more guarded.
Mm.
So,
I think the relationship that I went, my daughter met him, but because the first date we had, I didn't think was a real date.
oh, there you go.
And so I let him come to my house and pick me up because we'd known each other in college. I didn't think it was that big a deal, and it turns out it was a much bigger deal than I expected. So I would have met him out. I wouldn't have had him come to the house, but you know.
Well, I need to write a book on the my daughter and her friends and the names that they have assigned
Come up with for your people.
for all the people that I've gone out with, and the investigation that they do.
All right, so let me ask y'all a question along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel you would handle it? Because I don't know that, you maybe a little bit. How would you handle it if you knew you did not feel comfortable with your child with the significant other? I don't think and you knew you still had to send them over.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, praise be, mine is over 14.
Yeah, and you don't
I
have
do
to. Yeah.
not have to send her
Right,
over.
and that's
And
and
I do
you
not
don't
have
have to
to.
because your
But you
ex-husband's-
do.
Yeah, his girlfriend is sweet and kind, so you don't have to worry about that. But I know
And your
other
child
people who
is
have had to
14 is the age in Alabama and Tennessee where the child gets to say,
To decide.
I'm not doing it.
Whether they can,
Yeah.
whether they go or not.
Yeah, and so that's the only thing, and I was very lucky that the girlfriend that my ex had stayed around for a couple of years while my child was small, and that she was nice and sweet and kind to my child. so I didn't really have to deal with that.
And
But had it been a bad relationship, a bad feeling on my part, I don't know, because that gets into custodial interference. You can't. I mean, there's really not much you can do other than
I know
just
that's exactly. I didn't
prep
really.
your child for, if this happens, you can call me.
Yeah.
If this happens, text
I've never
me.
thought you had a really different situation. Like I have never thought, like, even if my ex-husband was in a relationship or not, I have never had any fear about my child being with his father. You know.
Yeah, see, and I
on
guess
his own.
and mine is different because
Yeah.
I knew. I mean, my whole divorce, I had to set it up where he did not drive my children, and really my children were old enough to drive, except for my daughter when we divorced, and then it was making sure that one of her brothers would take her so that they were driving and he wasn't driving, and there was just an understanding that you don't ride with dad,
Right.
because we just don't know. And and I didn't know the girlfriend well enough to know whether they would be able to ride with her, and so
Right.
the kind of unspoken rule was, until we get to know her, there's no riding with her either. I mean, because you just
Well,
with
you
an
have to err on
alcoholic,
the
you
side
just
of
don't know. I
caution.
had to err on the side of, I know y'all love your dad, and I want you to love him to pieces, but we don't trust him
Right.
We don't
to not
ride
be
with
drinking.
him.
We don't trust him to not be drinking ever. We just always assume that he is, and are pleasantly surprised when he's not. But we're not going to test that theory. And so it was a different situation, and I am fortunate. I think that my children were older to have
You
to
are.
deal with that. But I just I think it would have just been so heartbreaking to know you can't really deal with anything. You can't make it worse for your kids.
No.
You just have to deal with the fallout when they come home.
Well, and the thing I always did with mine is when she would come home. Now I had friends that would grill them. What did you do? What did you do? Did he feed you?
See, and that's not you
And
can't.
I just don't think that that's right. So my theory with child raising is they will tell you.
Yes.
They
That-
will spill it
I
eventually.
agree.
And
yeah,
I
and I
just,
did that too. I
let it
tried
be-
not to ask.
I
I
let
tried
it be
not to ask.
natural, and I would just say, "Did you have fun?
Yeah, did you have a
That's-
good time?
That's
Did
what I
you-
do.
Yeah.
Did you do anything special?
Yeah.
Did you have anything that needs to go in the dirty clothes? Like, I just kept it very practical, mom conversation, and then eventually about day 2 or 3, when they're going to bed or they're sitting with you at dinner, it just like blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
falls out. And I never wanted my child to feel like she ever had to pick a side or be an investigative reporter or
Right.
a spy, or I just didn't want her to have. I mean, it's hard enough, and they have enough crazy wadded up feelings when they're little,
Well,
and they have to navigate this whole new situation with a whole new person and a whole new house and a whole new everything. And I just thought that was too much stress.
Well,
Too
and
much
not only
stress.
that, but no matter how angry I was with my ex-husband, or how upset, or how much I didn't trust him, my kids, he was their dad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they always wanted him to be their dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their loving dad. Their dad who was going to love them unconditionally. They didn't want any of the mire and the muck and the ugly.
Yeah.
And so I felt like, even though I wanted to know, what does she like? What does she look like? What y'all talk about? I couldn't. It was not really any of my business. I really had no interest in having any sort of romantic relationship with my ex-husband at all. So I just to remember that to protect their relationship with him, I had to stay as completely out of it as I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really only ask. I mean, if she's nice to him.
Yeah.
That really is the only.
Well, because that's all. Yeah.
And then I found a picture of her and I saved it so that I could remember what she looked like. Just so I could remember what she looked like, because it only mattered the once.
Oh yeah. Well,
I know it's kind of
Right.
odd because then, I had not met this lady.
Uh-huh.
I had spoken to her on the phone, and I had seen a picture of her with my child that my child took on an adventure,
Mhm.
which was great. But if you had asked me to pick her out at the grocery store, there's no way I would have.
Yeah.
Well, and this is going to sound terrible, but I didn't care. You know what I'm saying? The opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And I was just so happy to have my peace, and
Yes.
that he was finding peace, and I was not a part of that.
Yes, that's how I feel, Beth.
That I did not study her, or
Yeah, that's how
you
I
know,
feel
it wasn't
too.
an obsession.
Thank you for joining us for Champagne Sunday. We had a wonderful time with this discussion, and we got so carried away that we've had to divide it into 2 different sessions. So we hope you join us back on our porch next Sunday to continue listening about how we have created a life that we love on that other side of divorce, and how we have embraced the lives that our exes have created on that other side of divorce, while we try and be the very best women that we can be for our kids, no matter what the situation. Thank y'all for joining us for Champagne Sunday.
See you next week,
See you
girls.
next week. Yeah, cheers.
Have a good week.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.